Reliability Hero podcast is brought to you by the mainstream community. We'll have conversations with maintenance and reliability practitioners just like you. Whether you take iron ore out of the ground, keep power plants running, fix aeroplanes, trains, conveyor belts or turbines, few things excite you more than making equipment and machines do more than they were ever designed to do. Faster, safer, longer and more efficiently. Let's just say you keep economies moving. I'm Andrew Daddo. Welcome to the Reliability Hero podcast. This is Reliability Hero. Andrew Daddo is my name, and I'm joined today by Michelle Ash. Now, you would have expected to see her at Mainstream in 2022 to do a keynote, but it didn't quite work out because Ooz Minerals, the company where she works, was under, intense interest from BHP. She's been with the mining industry and manufacturing sectors for over 20 years. She's been with Ooz Minerals since 2022 as the technology executive. She's accountable for ICT, including digital, robotics and automation, mining technology and transformation. And before that, she was CEO of Dassault Systems Geovia, which was the software division. So she's done a lot. She's done a lot of study as well, and she's done exceptionally well. So welcome to Reliability Hero, Michelle. Big intro.
Thank you. That's a fantastic intro. Yeah, well, I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Your rise from general engineering in mining to your place now has been, it's been a long haul, but it's also a pretty amazing rise.
Yeah.
What surprised you along the way?
I think what surprised me most was some opportunities that I was offered when I really didn't think I was necessarily ready for that opportunity, and some very supportive people that have helped my career along the way. So, to give you an example, I originally started as a blasting engineer. I was on the mining engineering side. And then after a couple of years in mining and planning, I was offered a role as maintenance superintendent of a truck shop. And,
Right.
It was a fantastic role and started me into sort of the reliability side of the mining business. But, again, a very supportive manager and general manager who saw something in my capabilities in terms of leadership that they could use and transfer from mining to maintenance. So, and I think it's important for all of us to take those opportunities, no matter how scary they are, because sometimes they're really daunting when a door's opened like that.
So you said maintenance engineer of a truck shop.
Yeah, so I was the superintendent.
That was the Rio, right?
Yeah, that was for Rio too. Yeah.
Okay. So and when they offered that to you, were you like, yes? Or did you go, what? Or, did you look around? Do you look around at the other people who are probably in line for the job and wonder why me?
Yeah, look, a bit of both. I mean, on one level, you look around and you go, am I the best? There are other people here that might be able to do it better, differently. And then, but also part of you goes, oh, man, this is going to be so exciting. I have never done anything like this. And I think, what made me comfortable in the end of taking that step and every time that same, really weird challenge has been offered is I look at, so what is my generic skill base? So in this case, it was around leadership and cultural change and asking the right questions and challenging people from an engineering perspective. And I remember that great Albert Einstein quote, which is that, problems that we have today can't be solved with the thinking that created them. Being prepared to just bring different thinking to those situations.
Now you're a student, like you are. When I Google stalked you, I went through your education background, right? So it's an engineering degree at Melbourne Uni, first of all. Then you're at Curtin for a graduate diploma in business.
Yep.
You went and did psych and philosophy at Deakin.
Yes. Yep.
Melbourne Business School, and then an economics degree at Melbourne Uni. And so this is all from 89 through to 2010.
Yes. Yeah, that would be right.
So and almost constantly studying, and whilst also working overseas.
Yeah. You make me sound lazy in the last 10 years. What was I doing in the last decade?
Well, no, it's really interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because I think about it the other way, going, "Holy crap! Don't you just get your job and this is great and
Yeah.
roll on?" So what is it about the learning and that Einstein quote as well? It's like, so you're clearly a student of people and the way they operate as well as
Absolutely.
machinery.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I love learning, and I guess the one great thing about the mining industry is often you're in outback towns, and you either like, should I study? Should I go to the pub? And I think my liver was quite happy that I decided to study quite a few times. But no, but look, I think constant learning, lifelong learning, is one of the most important attributes of a leader. So whether that is learning from our team members, from our kids, which we spoke about before we started the podcast, about how great it is to be surrounded by young people that teach us and help us learn about some of the changes and things that are happening for them within the world, but also academically, learn things. And I think it's important to balance those up. I've always been interested, yes, in the academic side. I love engineering. Economics I found fascinating because it's a combination of sort of maths, which I loved, obviously, and people and psychology. Really enjoyed psychology because it gave me a much deeper insight into, how people tick, how they think. Because certainly when I first started in leadership roles, I felt, singularly ill prepared to understand people because I'd done maths and STEM and, engineering up until then. And I think the ability to broaden your knowledge range, broaden, and just constantly learn. So, nowadays it's a lot of what I'm learning is how I influence other people and both good and bad, and how do I change that nuance at different organisations, have different cultures. How do I influence that? How do I change my behaviour to best suit those situations. But I'm going to have to think of something else to study. Maybe I have to do a master's in mineral economics or something.
The language. I think I feel a language is next for you. It's interesting that dealing with people in different ways and learning how to do that. And I know there's no one answer, and no one simple answer because we're all entirely different. But one of the things about engineers certainly is that I guess they're well known for not being necessarily people.
Yeah.
If I could say that which is it's unfair outside, but inside the engineering world, it's a very people-based business. But for outside the engineering world, it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Look, and it's it's interesting. So I think there's a couple of different factors in all of that. So there are some people that are just generally more interested in technical things, mathematics, etc., and find people confusing, frustrating, confounding. And then so I think there is a little bit of, let's call it, nature in there, our preferences. And then I think some of it is also nurture or education. One of the things that I was struck by, certainly in my time of learning engineering, I think it has changed at universities somewhat, but I think there's a long way for us to go, is that we don't teach engineers who are naturally most probably attracted to science, so they ended up in choosing those degrees rather than going into a more social or more people orientated degrees. We don't teach them much around how to work in teams, how to work with other people, how to interact. And I found that when you give some engineers that training, now there are always going to be some people that just prefer working on their own and doing their own thing, and that's great. And so you wrap a team around them that then can do the influencing of people. Because the challenge for all engineers is we design new things. That's part of our basis of being. And so as soon as you design new things, you've got to get people to do things differently, or to use that thing, or to implement that improvement idea that's come up. So there's, every engineer needs either some of those skills or somebody to help them. And I think that's the great thing about a team, is you don't have to have everybody having all of the skills, all of the talent, etc. It's about accepting that we are diverse, that, we do have different skills, different capabilities that we bring. Yes, we can improve them, and that's that lifelong learning thing. But if you wrap a nice diverse team around people, then I think then you can also be super effective. But then you've got to manage that diversity, and both as a leader, having people that are different to you in the team, because by definition that's what's going to happen. You go like, oh gosh, that's a grating on me because it's different to the way I think or the way I do things. But also managing the team, because, if you've got very different people in the team, you've got to sort of get the team to understand and accept that beautiful difference that person is bringing. And then, sometimes we have that shadow side that you have to manage that's related to that diversity or that strength.
It's interesting. I can see you, but no one else can see you. And I love that when you're talking about the difficult things, your face just breaks into this beautiful big smile. You made that good point about the engineers. They make things and create things, and then one of the difficulties is selling that story up the line, I suppose. So when you started, with your engineering career, how hard was it for you to sell your ideas, and then juxtaposed to that, now that you are in the leadership role and have been as such for some time, what's it like how do you react when someone tries to sell something up to you?
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. So, good question. So, look, when I first started, I was absolutely rubbish at selling my ideas, because as all engineers do, you go, oh, this idea is brilliant, and I had this fantastic attraction and, heartfelt warmth towards my idea, or, the idea that even the team had decided. And so, of course, it's sort of like you're almost hurt when people are sort of either critiquing, criticizing, whatever that might be your idea. And so learning to not only build relationships ahead of presenting an idea or a change to people. And so certainly, when I was working with Blast Crew or with the maintenance teams, building those relationships so that when I did come with a change I needed them to make or a different idea, it wasn't Michelle, this distant person with this bizarre idea. It was Michelle, the person I know and understand, with something that, let's listen to see whether that's going to be good for us. When you go up the line, though, it's the same thing. It's building that relationship, understanding what is important for that person. How do they like to receive or understand information? Because, of course, you can tell I'm verbally, very expressive. And so, I want to get in there and I want to talk to people and, we give them all sorts of information. And, I had a lot of people say to me, Michelle, just tell us the facts. We don't want all that verbiage, get short, sharp. But then you've got other people that want the background, want that context. And if you do short, sharp. Yeah. So it's all about understanding how do they best understand. And then I think the other thing I really had to learn, and, what I spend a lot of my time teaching others about who are presenting to me now, is how do you put a business case around these ideas? So what's the problem you're trying to solve, and why is that problem important? And if you solve that problem, what's the value uplift? So whether that's a financial value, whether that's a behavioural or speed or, ease value, but you've got to sell people the value and the problem that you're trying to solve, whether that's, at the board level, at, executive level, or, at maintenance level. And I think that's the one problem that engineers often have. And I see this in startups that I work with. I see this with the engineers I work with. We love the technical solution. And so we start trying to explain to people a technical solution. And then you start seeing people's eyes glaze over and they're starting to nod off on you. And what they want to know first is what's the problem you're trying to solve and why should they care about that problem being solved? And what's the value uplift? And then here's my solution. And then it's about knowing that person as to whether they want the solution short, sharp and clear, or whether they want it, with background and context and verbiage and, other things.
Okay. So there's a strong case that you're saying is that a really good idea might never get through if you can't actually manage to get it to the right people in the right way.
Look, absolutely. I've had many what I think are fantastic ideas never actually get implemented because
Can you
I've either
think of any examples?
Look, well, even even trying to simplify. More recently in my last couple of roles, trying to simplify the planning processes and to drive multiple inputs simultaneously. And again, it should, great idea. If it should be able to, truncate the time that it takes to do something. Whether that's a shut, whether that's a construction design, whatever it might be. But if you don't sell that idea appropriately, because suddenly I'm starting to talk to, so millennials get co-design, parallel workage, Uber collaboration. Gen X, like me, baby boomers, we go like, oh my God, that just sounds like craziness and hard work and multiple things happening simultaneously. And, that's just a whole heap of complexity we don't need in what's already a complex construction project. So, if you don't sell that idea well, all they see is the negative. Certainly for a couple of organisations that I've, tried to sort of sell this idea on, especially in construction too, and, how to parallel a lot in construction so that we can truncate time, it just gets into the far too hard basket. It's all I can see now is the risks. I can see lots of effort. Where's the real benefit? Will I get that? Is it too risky? It's all that.
Yeah, but that's one of the problems, isn't it, for that middle-aged cohort? Yeah. I mean, one of the things you were going to talk about, which you didn't get to talk about at Mainstream, was that people need to innovate at the same speed as that technology changes.
Yeah,
and as you say, like the young people. Yeah. So you've got to change. You've got to be able to move faster than the technology that's moving.
Yes.
With you.
Yeah, because so the idea around that basically is if we innovate slower than the technology or at the same speed as the new technology will keep coming through before we've even implemented the benefits of the old technology. So the rate at which we innovate has to be faster than the rate at which technology improves, so that we can then bed down those changes, those innovations, get the behavioural, get the change, get the value, and then as the next wave of technology comes through that's going to make a substantive improvement, then we start working with that one. Then we start, so people get used to not only the change, the pace of change, but also then we can keep up with not every small change in technology. I mean, if you think about Apple products, for example, Apple products have big changes every couple of models. So the latest one has had some quite substantive, not this is an ad for Apple, but, substantive changes to their iPhone. But the last couple were just sort of nuances. So I'm not talking about the nuances. I'm talking about
got rounder edges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's got,
And so what advice then for people dealing with that middle management who are reluctant? I mean, because I know, listening to the speakers at Mainstream and they talk about tech and AI, and I sit there going, don't want it. I actually, and it's really like I'm wary, and so I'm exactly what. Yeah. If I'm not in the business, I'm in the same business emotionally.
Yes.
Of being scared. So is there a way to deal with that and to try and sell that through?
Look, absolutely. So for me, it's about working with those people even more. So, the one bit of advice I gave to young leaders, but it's most probably exactly the same for young, not even young, innovators and engineers. If you are avoiding a conversation because you think it's going to be hard or uncomfortable, then that's the very time you need to have that conversation. So, often we avoid those people when we're designing, when we're, creating an idea. We avoid those people that we think are going to be negative or tough to deal with or whatever. And that just makes it worse because then they just get more negative and more, this isn't what I want to do and I don't want to make these changes. If we interact with those people constantly, we engage them, we get them involved involved in the design, so we're co-creating now. We are much more likely to not only have got them to board in, but now the thing that they were scared of, they've had some experience of, so we've done these little MVPs, minimum viable product, getting up to the big release. And, they see a piece of them in that final product. So, an example when I was in Barrack was we needed to get people to digitize. So they go from writing things on a piece of paper or communicating on the radio. I've just done a truckload, I've just done this, I've just done that. We wanted them to, in real time, punch it into a device so that we could, do the simultaneous, instantaneous planning sort of process. And everybody said to me, Michelle, people are going to reject this. They've got big fingers, they've got whatever it is. And so we started engaging the guys that were going to use and we said, you can have, it had to be an iOS device because of the security requirements, but, you can have a little iPhone, you can have whatever they called the medium-sized ones at the time, you can have an iPad, whatever size you want, you choose your device.
We're going to look at your fingers, choose the appropriate device.
We're going to issue them to you, so it's your device. You're going to have to take it home and love it. But we also got them working through with us. Did they like things on the left? Did they like things on the right? Touching, playing. So by the time we released the devices, everybody had touched, field, played. They liked the colours. They'd done things on left and rights and all that sort of stuff. And what was really interesting was actually we had the fastest take up in the middle age, the older group. So people, let's just say, I don't know whether people like saying they're old or not, but let's just say 40 plus. So above millennials. And in fact, it was the millennials, the 20s to 40s, that we had most challenges with. And again, something we just hadn't thought about. They're sitting there going, but hang on, it's still not as easy to use as the devices I have at home. It's not as intuitive in the way they see intuitive, which is actually really different, which is sort of also interesting when you're trying to manage, multi-generational cohorts. Anyway, they were fine. They still used it. They just had really, more concerns.
It's a good, and I guess rightly so. So with millennials and their desire to grow and need to be taught and trained and move up the company, is there a strategy for them that you would suggest?
Look, so absolutely. So, I find, that cohort between 20 and 40, let's say, so they want to get involved. They're passionate. They have great ideas. They're highly collaborative by nature most often. They want to do new and interesting things and often are very comfortable to work on a project basis. So, I want to do this project, which is interesting, exciting, and then I'll go and do this other project. And so certainly getting, I think, that cohort engaged and involved in some of these improvement projects, giving them something to stretch towards, building some of their leadership skills and capabilities through that project sort of process really helps sets them up for success, both in terms of, building those skills, building those behaviours, but also getting that visibility so that when different roles become available, people already know, they've seen them, and then they can, quite easily be part of that. So this is somebody who we would like to select into that role because we know them, we've experienced them. So I think giving much more maybe than prior generations, that opportunity to do lots of projects and build that capability is, I think, important, and stretch and challenge. And then, different things to learn, not only practically on the job, because quite often very sort of hands-on or real-time capability, but, also give opportunities to, especially there's so many great online programs and courses and things like that that also can engage people, as well as, the traditional sort of, attendance at different conferences and, universities and different things. But there's just such a great variety of things now to get people engaged and involved. But I think that the biggest difference with millennials, the 20 to 40, is those 500-page user manuals that we used to have for, SAP or whatever it was, and the 5-day training programs that we used to put people through, they do not work. It's got to be a lot shorter, sharper. Let's try some things, video orientated. If it's not intuitive, then, it becomes very frustrating.
And Michelle, are you inclined, given what you said at the very beginning about your movements through the industry and doing jobs that you didn't think you were ready for, are you inclined to put people in the same position that you were put in, to challenge them that way?
Look, absolutely. And I think, if we're looking for somebody who is 100% capable to do a job that we might have available, we're not stretching our teams, ourselves, our industry enough. And often that unlikely candidate actually is a really good choice. But, you've got to be cautious about that. You've got to go, really think through, what are the key skills and attributes I really need? Because often knowledge can be picked up relatively quickly if you've got the right skills and attributes. Someone who wants to learn, someone who's intelligent, et cetera. Going, well, I really need a mining engineer, or I really need an electrical engineer or a reliability engineer. May or may not be true. It just depends on the role and the challenge.
Yeah.
So I think just being much more diverse in our thinking around who's appropriate, and then we'll get some really interesting candidates. So, often I have put people into roles where, I'm a little bit nervous about but we identify their skills gaps or their capability gaps early, like as I put them in. These are the gaps you're going to have, and this is what we're going to work on. So I don't entirely agree on the sink and swim process. Only because I think once people start sinking, they start losing confidence. If you don't step in fast enough, I'm not saying mollycoddle or baby them, but as a leader, we have to identify early on when there are glitches, step in with the coaching and the capability build, rather than leaving it too long and then people have lost confidence, others have lost confidence in them. It becomes really blatantly obvious that there's, some skills and capabilities gaps. So you can't let that happen. But I think, stretching, challenging, early interventions, coaching, developing is absolutely important to building capability in our industry. And I think it's also one of the practical realities. If you look at the number of engineers in Australia that we are that are graduating across all the different disciplines, and we just look at some of the, just based on projections, some of the amount of roles that we are going to need, for some of the whether it's in mining or whether it's in construction over the next sort of few years, we really, we have a skills gap in a number of areas, or just a numbers gap in a number of these areas, and we've already got, I think, a lot of the more experienced and older engineers already, working well into their sort of 60s and 70s in some cases. And so, there's not that group to draw back into the market. So we really have to, build capability for those that we've got.
Yeah. What about the place for women in asset management and mining? As a successful woman yourself, was it harder than it needed to be to get to where you got to? Was it, and are the opportunities the same? And I know that's sort of a difficult question.
It is.
It's a nervy question because no one wants to be sort of asking the wrong thing. But as a woman who's really succeeded, exceptionally well, literally worked around the world.
Yeah.
Are the experiences here the same as overseas? And is there a bigger challenge for women?
So look, I think. So we have come a long way. So when I graduated engineering 30 years ago, there was 2 women out of 80 in my class. When I started in mining, I was one of very few women that weren't in the administration sort of area. And in fact, in 92 was the first year that women were allowed underground in Australia. So the US sort of started. So I think we've come a long way. You look at BHP with 30-odd% women. You look at our average in our industry is about 17. Construction's a little lower. I think it's about 14. So, there are a lot more women in the industry, therefore a lot more opportunities. I think there's a lot more yet for us to do, especially bringing women into supervisory roles, making roles more available to a diverse range of people by not necessarily insisting that they be a particular location, but creating a lot more virtuality. And so that's, one of the key things that we're trying to do at Oz at the moment is to create a much more virtual, flexible organisation so that people can contribute no matter where they are or live. But look, I think Australia, we're at the better end of the range, but still not as good as some. I think if I look at Canada, where I've worked, a lot more acceptance of women in some of the roles that we're still struggling with in Australia. But Australia a lot better than in other countries where I've worked, Tanzania, for example, in Africa, where there were very few women moving into engineering roles, moving into maintenance roles, etc., because it just wasn't considered culturally that sort of roles that women would or should aspire to. But some fantastic women that were there, and also challenges still.
So how are you seen in Tanzania then? So you're I mean, you've literally worked. You've done some stuff, ladies.
So look, when I became general manager of Bulyanhulu, which I was for a period between us getting a general manager in, so I was there for about a year or a bit more. When I first took on that role, I thought, what have I done here? Did I think this through? And that was especially so when I'm standing, to be introduced to everybody, and there are about 2,000 people in the crowd because, one group had just come up from underground, one group was about to go down into underground, and I've got the head of HR introducing me as the new general manager, and I thought this could go very wrong very quickly. And it was interesting though because I basically made a little speech around, that I was so excited to be here in Tanzania, that I, wanted to be part of the sort of, the Bulyanhulu family. So I did a bit of a speech. And then you go to people can ask 5 questions. 5 people can ask questions. First guy gets up and he was the head of the union. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to go horrendously wrong because he spun around and now he's starting to talk at the crowd. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to potentially go, south.
Yeah.
And in fact, what he said was that he basically said, right, everybody, we have a mama as a general manager. Now, I thought at that point I was like, oh, okay, I'm a mother. I later found out that in Swahili, mama means grandmother. But, so I had I have to get my head around the fact that I'm middle-aged and, in fact, I'm a grandmother while I was in Tanzania. So I'm very over that. But, they're right. I was actually 3 times – I was at the age that I was the age that the average life expectancy for Tanzania, and certainly the age that most women would be a grandmother if you just do the 15, 15, 15.
Okay, yeah.
But look, so it was interesting the way I was dealt with in Tanzania, and look, I learned Swahili. I engaged with village elders. The elder community in Tanzania is men and women. So, there's sort of an equality. Women are seen as very much the mother figure, so the nurturer, but also the interesting thing in Tanzania, which is what this guy's speech was about, is that women are not only nurturing and kind and bring up the family, but they also are the ones that make the hard decisions. They tell you what you need to know when you need to know it, because unfortunately it falls to the women to decide often, do we get medicine for a sick child or do I feed the rest of the children? And so they literally make life and death decisions for the family, and so there was this level of respect, and then there were some weird situations where women weren't allowed to go underground, and if they did go underground, it would have to be, then purged of any, evil spirit or intent, even though I reminded them that St. Barbara was the patron saint of mining. Because they're very Catholic, very Christian and Muslim centric. But they decided that wasn't true for me because I wasn't a woman, I was a general manager. And so we got round some of these things just by reclassifications, which was really interesting. But I loved working in Tanzania. It was a fantastic experience. My Tanzanian family, my Bulyanhulu and North Maran and Buzwagi families, just beautiful, beautiful people that really wanted to strive, do right by their families, improve their life and their lifestyles.
So did you take that nurturing sense? I get the feeling you probably work that way anyway, like just listening to you talk more about people and the process of dealing with people and different ways to deal with people as you do actually talk more about that than the actual processes, the business processes. So clearly you're a person-centric style, but did you sort of learn more about that when you're in Tanzania and as a nurturer and bring that back to your work in the West?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely. I think every time I go into a different culture, I not only learn about that culture and adapt my style to fit into that. So, when I worked in Japan, when I worked in China, when I worked in Laos, but you can't help but learn and make that part of your then construct. So, I think certainly now I bring back this into what I'm doing at the moment with Oz around the absolute need to work collaboratively. You just can't get around but work collaboratively. And then, I think that same again, the yin and yang of the mama, which is, yes, it's nurturing and it's developmental, but it's also about trying to tell people what they need to know when they need to know it. Because, if you really love someone, you're not going to let them fail. You're not going to let them, and it's not through mollycoddling. It's through, you need to know this at the moment, which is that, your behaviour is really badly affecting this person, this group, this crowd. This is specifically what you're doing and we need to correct that. We need to do something different or, whatever it might be. But, it's normally behavioural ones that we're most hesitant to tell people about. We just let them, go, which is, and I've said to leaders often, like, you're saying you like this person, so you're not going to tell them about this thing that they're doing that's really getting people's backs up. You just got to tell them.
Really interesting.
Now, not everyone likes that, and that's and that's a completely different issue in terms of how you then deal with it if people are just uncomfortable with taking on feedback, and that's a whole other kettle of fish, which is something, again, it's a skill we need to develop from an early age, which is, how do you take on this feedback, modify your behaviour?
It just reminded me, we both have mentioned that we've got young, we've got older children, 20s.
Yeah, 20.
And so it's sort of the same, but it's not. We're at the movies the other night and it was really a very wordy film, Amsterdam it was, lots of talking. And there's young kids come in about halfway through and they start talking and then people sitting there like this. And I had to the shits in the end. And I went over there and I said, shut up. Shut up. You have to shut up. And so they and then I went and then came back and they were better. And then at the end of it, I said to them, listen, you got to understand, people are paying money to come and entertain themselves.
Yeah.
You guys are sitting here talking, you're ruining everyone else's whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was fine. Then my daughter said to me, so this is the advice. This is the thing about learning from young people. She said, Dad, you've got to do it quickly. If they pull their camera out, you will be a star on TikTok. And I went, okay.
Yeah.
But it's that thing. But it's like people, I guess what made me think of it is that you're saying people need to know about their behaviour, that it's out or wrong or off.
Yeah.
It's a matter of finding a way to tell them in a way that they understand.
Yeah, and they're going to take it on board. Yeah.
Yeah, as a final, back to you. As a final thing, have you learnt more by succeeding or through? I'm not going to say failing, but
no, we all
things
fail.
not going well.
I think Look, I think it's a mixture of both, but I think when things do go wrong, when we fail, when something, and I've had some complete mess ups. I was going to say the other word, but I remember, but reflecting, again, trying to identify it as early as you can. And so, some of my biggest mess ups were persisting, just trying to do it harder, deeper, stronger, whatever, persisting well beyond what should have been let's just stop and try a different approach or try something different. And, when I look back at the thing, whenever I regret something or I look back at something and I go, God, I should have done that differently, it is typically either I didn't step in when I should have, or I didn't stop something soon enough that was going off the rails, and it just went further off the rails. So I think those things are important for us to have. Like if you are constantly successful, I don't think you will have the depth of humanity, the depth of personality that you have when you have a mix of things that do. And look, if everything goes wrong all the time, you're going to be pretty sad as well. So it's through that balance that we become deeper, more interesting, more capable human beings. If I could have a wish for someone, it would be not that you are blissfully successful all the time, and not that you are, always not successful all the time, because both those ends are, for me, not fantastic. It's that you have a mix, but that you learn from both. What did I do or what did our team do, or what did others do that really helped us be successful there? And then, what could I have done differently to have averted that failure or that mistake?
That's a great place to end. So, Michelle, I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been really fun and really illuminating as well. So thanks very much for your time on Reliability Hero.
Excellent. Thank you all. Stay safe.